Hello and welcome to the BloodStream podcast, a show serving the greater bleeding disorders community, brought to you by Believe Limited and BloodStream Media, and made possible thanks to our presenting sponsor, Takeda. I am your patient advocate and host, Patrick James Lynch.
And I am your healthcare advocate and your nonprofit nerd and your other host, Amy Board, reminding you to please speak with a medical professional before making any treatment decisions.
So many hats that you wear, Amy Board, but you do it with grace and precision.
Oh, thank you, sir.
On today's show, we have Rick Lindfors Ackerman, Minnesotan search and rescuer and fellow living with type 3 von Willebrand disease. He joins to share a bit of his story and his reasons for wanting to join the program. We've got that and more on today's show. Welcome to BloodStream.
Hey, listeners, as always, thank you for joining us. And if you like what you hear, please subscribe to the BloodStream podcast wherever you get those podcasts. And you can always follow us on social media.
You can. It's not creepy. It's actually what's expected. Follow people 100%. On social media.
It's like expected.
Hoped for, some might even say. I also want to remind you, dear listeners, that the BloodStream podcast is indeed made possible by that presenting sponsor, Takeda. That's right, Takeda. Takeda's got this website, bleedingdisorders.com, where you can learn all about Takeda's resources for and commitment to the bleeding disorders community. Takeda believes, get this, Amy, in a world free of bleeds.
We love that.
And they are dedicated more than ever in their efforts to offer a wide range of programs and support to help patients throughout their treatment journey, wherever on that journey they may be. You can learn more by simply visiting bleedingdisorders.com. One more time, because it's on my script, bleedingdisorders.com. And for their founding and ongoing support of the BloodStream podcast, I would just like to say, thanks, Takeda.
Thank you, Takeda. Patrick, it's July.
I don't know how, but you're accurate.
It is July. It freaks me out. It's July 2025. That's insane.
It's like that feels so far in the future. How is that where we are?
I know. We were chatting a little bit this morning about, things to chat about on this podcast. But but one of the things we were discussing is that BDC is coming up. The Bleeding Disorder Conference, it's the largest patient conference, even though there is physicians are there. It's widely attended. It's the biggest conference in our community, especially for the patient community. It's coming up in Denver, Colorado, my hometown.
Shouts
Not gonna
out.
lie. Psyched about it. So are my parents.
Are they coming?
Actually, yes. Of course they are. Don't be insane.
Yes.
Yeah.
They get to see the science fair.
They do.
That's exciting.
They're very excited about it. But it's going to be in August, and we're like full tilt gearing up for BDC.
Yep. What are you doing there this year? Like you personally, you have some stuff, right?
Oh my gosh, it's always, yes, so much stuff. The science fair is coming back. So if you haven't been to BDC, listeners, if you haven't been to BDC yet, you have to check out the science fair. It's in the exhibit hall. It's hard to miss. We're like humongous, and we have like a massive, like 7-foot microscope. You cannot miss us. It's like bright.
That's us. We're the 7-foot microscope. There's not two. So when you see the 7-foot microscope, you're in the right place.
100%. Like you'll walk by it and you'll be like, for sure. This is Patrick and Amy's situation, for sure. But it's the best thing we do. I'm not going to lie. It's the best thing we do. It's like a middle school science fair on steroids, and it's all about bleeding disorder science. And like really, starting from the basics, like what is the clotting cascade? Our bodies actually naturally balance themselves to make sure that we actually do clot, but not too much. It's so cool. Like our science and our human anatomy is like the biggest mystery of the world, and it's so cool. And you get to learn about treatments. We have a phenomenal like Price is Right wheel that you get to wheel to learn about ultra rare factor disorders. That
makes
fun.
My childhood. I think I've talked about this on the podcast before, but when I had like my worst episode on inhibitors and bleeding and missing school, I would come home from school or wouldn't go in the first place, and I would watch Price is Right with my grandmother. That was the routine. Like I'd be home in time to watch Price is Right with grandma. So when I saw the designs for that giant spinny wheel, it was like, my childhood realized in the science fair.
Oh my gosh, I can't believe you've never told me that story. That makes it so special.
I gotta save something for the podcast. Are you also, though, are you moderating or hosting anything?
Yeah, I'm doing one session on Saturday that's specifically about stories. And this was not planned, but because it's in Denver, Colorado, and I was the executive director of the Colorado chapter for a long time, I know all three people. One was my board president, who I adore, and the other, John Christian, now is a massive advocate that we met because he had an insurance access issue. So I was kind of, a partner with him of trying to figure that out right before I left, and now he's an advocacy legend in Colorado. And then the new program director, Anna, actually has hemophilia B, and so she's going to be on the panel as well. She took Hannah Berry's job because we stole Hannah.
I didn't realize she had hemophilia B. That's cool.
She has hemophilia B. And so I'm not going to lie, I'm probably going to be emotional. Like, these are just my people.
Yeah. Well, you got to put this in your calendar because I want to make sure I show up to it. I don't
have it in my calendar?
Get it in there. Get it in there.
Oh my God.
I'm calling her out live on the podcast. Well, that's
seriously.
Cool. I want to go. That's the reason.
Oh, that's so sweet. What are you moderating? You always moderate you moderate way more important things.
First, no, I don't. And that was a very clever way to take the spotlight off of you. Well played. But the answer to your question is I believe I'm in two things. There's a candid conversations session that Brendan Hayes has led every year, it seems like, for the last many. So I've been involved as a panelist or moderator and will be again. I'm not sure which role I have, but it doesn't really matter. And on Sunday the 24th, I did this last year, a session that Michael de Grand Prix hosted that Nicole Scappi organized, a moment of reflection. So it's a session intended to give you an opportunity to kind of crystallize some of the takeaways before we all, hit the final night and get out of there. So those are my two responsibilities, and I'm looking forward to them. Like you said, we're in July 2025 somehow. I can't believe we're only weeks out. And we're going to have on the podcast either next episode or the one after that, we'll have Phil Gattone back, CEO of MBDF, to give us a preview from his lens. So we'll bring that to you before the conference takes place, coming up very soon.
Cool. It's July.
All right. I don't know how, but I believe it because this is the third shirt I've worn today. I've sweat through two and I'm on number 3. So
Great.
I believe it.
Great.
So Rick Lindfors Ackerman, he's a listener to the podcast. He's a guy living with type 3 von Willebrand disease. He's got a good story that I've already stepped on a little bit, so I won't do it any further. We'll just get to it. Here's my conversation with Rick Lindfors Ackerman. All right, joining me now is Rick Lindfors Ackerman from the great state of Minnesota. Rick is living with type 3 von Willebrand disease, is a listener to the program, and today he's a guest. Rick, thanks for joining me here on BloodStream.
Patrick, thanks for having me.
So I'm intrigued by your journey in search and rescue. So I guess let's start here. You mentioned in the bio you sent over to me that you did search and rescue in Oregon for 7 years before moving back to Minnesota, where you're now a search and rescue dog handler. Why search and rescue?
It's something that after I got out of college and I was working in television that I was writing about for news stories. There was a pretty large mission in Oregon on a mountain called Middle Sister in the early winter of 2014. And when I was writing about that for television, I looked them up to see, if I could learn more, if I could have more context. And at the time, I thought search and rescue was done by Park Service or military or law enforcement firefighters that were part of special teams. And I found out that these mountain rescue people are volunteers. They have regular day jobs, and then they train and become volunteers of their sheriff's office, and then they go and do backcountry search and rescue. And I thought, well, that's pretty darn incredible. And in looking them up, I realized that I had some skill sets at the time that could probably qualify me into the team. And at the time, I wasn't doing a ton outside of my day job, having just graduated from the University of Oregon. And I thought, well, I should give this a shot, thinking back to some other wilderness emergencies that I'd had when I was a teenager with von Willebrand. And I thought, well, this is something that I think I can do and probably should do if I can.
Wow. Yeah, you mentioned you had 2 excavation situations come about. Can you talk a little bit about those?
Yeah, self-evacuations. So when I was a teenager, I went to a YMCA camp called Minoja, and that's in northern Minnesota near Grand Marais. And historically, my parents have been trail guides there. So that was kind of the thing to do. You become a teenager, you try canoeing or backpacking at Minoja. It's a very awesome camp. So you could do any trip from either 7 days to 50 days. And in my second trip was a canoe trip in the Boundary Waters in Minnesota. And at the time, I had a passport in my arm for infusing. And during that trip, I suffered a sprained ankle. And when trying to infuse factor for that, factor just wouldn't go through the port. So the trail guide wasn't sure what was happening to me with that. It never happened before, where the medicine just wouldn't flow through. That first push of saline just kind of hit a roadblock. And so we had to make the decision to move the team to a trailhead, which took another day sort of out of the way to get to a trailhead where we knew there'd be a landline phone. The trail guide called the camp nurse, who at the time happened to be my cousin, who was very familiar with Willebrand. And she thought, well, it's possible that with the weight of the pack straps against your kind of the inner shoulder, that might push that catheter shut. So let's try pushing 10 milliliters of saline through, see what happens. And it goes through because we'd lightened the load after the sprained ankle. And so that it opened back up. And so I was able to do factor and then continue that trip. And then that second one was backpacking Yellowstone the year after. Super dry air leading to tons of nosebleeds, and going through factor far faster than I thought I could keep up with. So we had to remove from the trailhead, go to the area near Old Faithful, and my parents next day aired additional factor over, along with a bunch of like M&Ms and other candies that make backpacking more fun. And so that kind of was in the back of my head when I was signing up for search and rescue, because I kind of knew that wilderness emergencies can happen to anybody for any number of reasons. And I kind of wanted to sort of pay forward to my younger self, having gone through that, and having, even though I was with groups of people, it's sort of a lonely and kind of harrowing experience to be the one that needs help, and having to do it yourself, getting out of there.
Yeah. How did that part stick with you thereafter? My experience impacted other people's experience part. How did you process that?
I felt a good bit of guilt, actually, and I kind of self-isolated from in those times, because I wasn't really I wasn't happy at all with what was happening. Having to be the reason that people are having to change what they're doing, and it's something that only happens to me as far as being a bleeder goes. And that, being, I think, probably 13 and 14 or 14 and 15 at the time, it was, something that I kind of had to reserve a bit and try to process. And it kind of worked through with adulthood that, later coming to terms with, it's okay to have things happen to you as a bleeder, but you can't change the fact that eventually you're going to have a bleed. You have von Willebrand's or hemophilia. It's going to happen, but you can change how you interpret it, how you treat it through, good planning, and then focusing on yourself mentally to, recognize that it's not, how do I put this? It's not your fault that, something has happened, but there's not much of a reason to feel guilty about it, so to speak. If you can, as long as you're managing well and you sort of take control of your response, then you're in good shape, I think.
Bleeds will happen. In spite of whatever we may try to do. I'm curious, growing up, were you very outdoorsy? Was your family comfortable with you being outdoorsy given the von Willebrand disease? Talk to me about that.
They really wanted me and my younger brother, who also was von Willebrand's type 3, they wanted us to have the experiences that they had, whether that was skiing or hiking or canoeing. So very outdoors oriented family. So summers up north in Minnesota, canoeing, kayaking, backpacking, and then the winter learning how to ski, later snowboarding. And they were really motivated to figure out how to make that work. And we had a great hematologist at Children's Minneapolis who, helped us develop the response plans for anything that could happen, whether we're playing sports or in the wilderness, traveling. So there was a really, really good support system around that.
What's the age gap between you and your brother?
3 years.
And how was it growing up with someone because I grew up with a brother who also had hemophilia A, and I didn't really have a lot of touch points with people with hemophilia, but I did have my brother. So it felt like it made everything a little bit more normal or comfortable in some way. And I'm curious if you had a similar experience.
Yeah, it definitely was something that one of us always kind of had an idea of what the other one was going through. Like we both had some joint stuff happen. I think I was a little heavier on the nosebleed side of things growing up, but we both had this sort of mutual understanding of what the other kind of needed at any point. We both knew far more than our peers about the right way to rest, ice, and compress your joints and take care of that stuff. And we both developed our own ways of really taking care of ourselves after an incident. But yeah, and of course, both having passports growing up in our arms, we both understood the social end of, hey, what's that in your arm? And having to constantly explain over and over to whomever was asking, and having to, talk about bleeding disorders at different phases in our life.
For those who might not be accustomed to it, can you explain what a passport is?
Yeah. So it's essentially, it's an infusion point that you put underneath the skin. It's used in other treatments for disease. But for us, if you don't have good veins growing up when you're a kid, it's easier just to surgically insert the passport, and there's a catheter that goes up your arm into your chest, and that's how you deliver medication until time comes when your body either starts to push it out, or if you've developed good veins in that time, which is the goal.
It sounds like growing up you were at a very good treatment center, had great family support, again, have a brother who also has the condition. Did you face any obstacles with respect to either diagnosis, accessing treatment, or accessing services of any kind?
So starting with diagnosis, I had diagnosis on day one. Right out the gate, I had a cut that didn't heal, and they thought, well, we should probably take a look at that. And lo and behold, von Willebrand's type 3 comes back. So the family starts kind of back tracing, who may be carriers or who might already gone undiagnosed. So diagnosis was fairly quick. As far as access goes, we've been really fortunate to, have the factor that we need, and then a support system, both in the HTC that we had, and then the coaches that we had in our respective sports growing up. They understood what would be required of them, but also what we would have to do if there was ever an incident. And it usually was, if there's serious bruising, let the parents know, and we'll treat from there, kind of thing. Yeah.
And did you meet other kids with von Willebrand disease growing up?
Yeah. So there was a great summer camp. Back then it was called Camp Courage, but it was in northern Minnesota near the town of Bemidji. And that was a camp where kids from across the Midwest would go for a week. Because of hemophilia, von Willebrand's, that nonprofit did quite a few disabilities-focused camps for a couple of different demographics. But so that's where we met other kids growing up with von Willebrand's. And so that was kind of getting a quintessential summer camp experience for kids. And it still goes on today. It's called Camp Nod Plot now. And it's run between the HTC at the University of Minnesota and also the Upper Midwest Bleeding Disorders Alliance. It's still running strong. It's a great program.
In the web series that I created, Stop the Bleeding, we did one season that took place at a fictional summer camp, family camp called Camp I Don't Wanna Bleed, directly inspired by Camp Wanna Clot. So it was a little tip of the cap to camp in general, and to that camp in particular. What was your relationship like during transitioning out of high school age, becoming a young adult, moving into college? Because that's usually an inflection point where people's relationship to community, to disease changes. What was your experience like?
So the first part was, we have to make sure we're able to get factors. So establish relationships within the University Health Center at the University of Oregon. So delivering factor, making sure that was on hand and well supplied, and then making sure that communications were still good between my HTC and any doctor that I was seeing at the time. So when I was at college, I blew up my ACL snowboarding. That required a lot of communication between my HTC and my doctor as far as what to do with treatment leading up to surgery, and then how to monitor post-surgery going into physical therapy. So it wasn't too bumpy a ride. And people that I've met who are in college right now have reported that it's been fairly straightforward to get University Health Center to store factor to understand the HTC relationship and make sure that the student has access to the drugs.
And what about on a social level? You mentioned having the passport as a kid, and it obviously becomes something you have to talk about more than you want to. Was that continuing in college? Did you find yourself talking much about von Willebrand disease? Were you trying to hide it? Tell me about that.
Yeah, so in high school, I got the port taken out, I think, between 15 and 16. So, it's there going in during middle school and elementary school. And I don't think people are at their social best in middle school. It's having had ports in both arms, the scarring is permanent. So, but as high school goes on, people who knew me kind of understood that, oh yeah, this is something that I had for a bleeding disorder. But in middle school, that can lead to bullying or pointing. The fact that somebody has to use needles on a regular basis is not something that's easily understood for middle schoolers. So therefore, it's something that's kind of easily made fun of. Going into college, not so much. I think by the time people reach adulthood and they see, I have medical bracelets on all the time, so they understand, oh, yeah, this is like having diabetes or having some other chronic condition that requires some kind of presence and treatment. And the people that I spend my time around, they understood it and worked with it.
You mentioned that you were writing for television at the time that search and rescue kind of came onto your radar in a meaningful way. What was it that you were doing for television, and how did you wind up in that line of work?
So I was an overnight producer at the time for a CBS station in Eugene, Oregon. And at the time I was in college, I was trying to figure out what to do. And I enjoyed writing a lot. I enjoyed photography and video work. And that's how I thought I could combine those two passions of writing and video work into TV news. So I got hired on as an overnight producer for that station right out of college. Stuck with that, stayed on overnights for 4 years, which is a terrible thing to do to your sleep schedule. And then transitioned out of that. More leadership roles came along within that station. So promoted a few times, moved over to daytime in the land of the living. And so did that for 8 years and then moved back home to Minnesota.
And what have you been doing since moving back home to Minnesota for work?
Work in manufacturing with a family company. So we make hydraulic equipment for farm equipment, construction, and refuse hauling. So it's not terribly exciting, but it's good work.
A natural progression from overnight television producing, of course.
Yeah, totally natural.
I want to give you a chance to respond to something that I heard a couple of weeks ago and made me kind of angry. There was, and I didn't witness this myself, but at a pretty prominent hematology meeting, there was a hematologist who stood up and questioned if there was any need for people with von Willebrand disease to have treatments to begin with. And I know why it made me angry, but speaking to somebody who has von Willebrand disease, let me just ask you the question directly. Do people with von Willebrand disease need to have access to treatments?
110%. Yes, that's kind of a shocking thing to come up with. I think I've got a lot of spent syringes and nosebleed material and ankle wraps that would tell you otherwise as far as whether or not we need treatment. So it's I was at a bleeding disorders conference a couple months back and talking with someone who was a factor 7 deficiency, and we kind of agreed that we're kind of the weird ones in the room, not well recognized, but definitely in need of treatment, especially when von Willebrand's as a whole, considering type 1, type 2, type 3, it's fairly common as a bleeding disorder. It's not going to, it's going to express in different ways, but definitely requires treatment to avoid lifelong complications that can happen from lack of treatment.
And to consider that people with von Willebrand disease are literally 1,000 times more common than people with hemophilia, and we would never ask that question about people with hemophilia, it does sort of just boggle the mind. And I figured your response would be along those lines, but I wanted to ask you directly. Rick, this has been really lovely just getting to know you in this context. And again, I appreciate that you're a fellow community member and a listener to the show. So to fellow listeners out there, people who have vWD, factor 7, hemophilia, caregivers, clinicians, we have a lot of different people across the stakeholder group that pay attention to this program. Is there any message or anything you'd like to say that we haven't touched on?
I would say to anyone out there who's listening, if you're trying to decide Whether or not you can do something with hemophilia von Willebrand's, my advice would be to just try it and make a plan to try it and see where it leads you. That's I didn't think I would get this far as doing search and rescue work from mountain to dog work or anything like that, but just taking the first step is the key to everything in that.
What's the best part about the dog element of your search and rescue work now?
I think it's that the dog is having just as much fun doing the job as I am. Well, for the dog, it's a game. It really is a game. It's find something with their nose, get rewarded. The human on the other end is probably stressed, having to manage the mission and everything. But the amount of fun that you see the dog having when they're doing the working part of it. My dogs are border collies, and so that when they get a job, they're like, "Yeah, let's do the job." And then my first real exposure to search and rescue dog work was a mission a couple of years ago where interacted with another handler who came on my team or interacted with my team. I could just see that his dog was having a blast, and I thought, okay, we should give this a try down the line, because my then only dog at the time later on found it really fun and ended up certifying. So yeah, just taking that first trial with them.
Well, you're planting seeds in my mind now as well. I don't know. Russell will have to think about it. I don't know if you're cut out for it, but maybe one day. I have a Labradoodle who would enjoy playing games out in the mountains, I think. So if I ever had the courage, I think
there are
he would
a lot
join
of
me.
doodles, and there are a lot of doodles in canine search and rescue that I've met. So it's there's potential.
I'm not surprised to hear it. They're pretty smart. Well, Rick, thanks again for reaching out. I've loved this conversation, and I hope you and I have a chance to meet in person sooner than not. But thank you again for reaching out, and I appreciate you sharing for the audience today.
Definitely. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Rick, for coming on and sharing your story and giving me some ideas about future activities Russell and I might engage in. I very much appreciate that. I mean, you pick up ideas where you pick them up. Thanks,
100%.
as always, to our presenting sponsor, Takeda. We literally could not do this show without your support. bleedingdisorders.com for more. July 25th is our next episode, Amy Board. What can the listeners expect to hear next week?
We've got a pretty banger gene therapy segment for you the next episode. Of course, our gene therapy segment is brought to you by CSL Behring. And on this episode, Hannah starts talking about longevity, which is like that money question when we're thinking about gene therapy, especially gene therapy for hemophilia B. We've got new data for you, and we're really excited about that segment.
Fantastic. So subscribe if you haven't already to make sure that is delivered to you the moment it goes live. And with that, Amy Board has one final word.
No, that was it. I thought that was my cue to talk about the mailbag at BloodStreamMedia.com.
Well, it is.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Okay. Subscribe, follow us on social media, and email us at mailbag@BloodStreamMedia.com. Mailbag@BloodStreamMedia.com. So you can share your story or all the things.
Just like Rick did. That's how it happens.
Just like Rick did.
It's that simple.
Literally, it happened.
That's how you get on the show. Just email us. Mailbag@BloodStreamMedia.com. I am your host, Patrick James Lynch.
And I am your host, Amy Board.
And until next time, take self-care of yourself. Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.